demonstration on a 3-color reductive relief block. It's called reductive because you print layers and subsequently remove more material and then register on top of your previous layers. It's also referred to as a suicide block because once you get to the end, you can't go back to the beginning because you've removed that material. There is another method that can be reproduced indefinitely, which is with multi-blocks, but that is a demo for a different day. Wrapping your head around the reductive relief method, it can be a little bit difficult at first. So to help illustrate the process, I have a previous print. This is a 3-color reductive relief block, and this is the block that I printed it from. This is MDF, and I'm going to be showing you today on linoleum, which is actually a lot easier to carve. So once you've figured out where your colors are going to be and your image, you'll need to reverse your image. So I just took a piece of tracing paper, traced my image, made like a couple modifications, and then flipped it over like this so that I would have the reverse image. Took my 9x12 linoleum block, took a piece of red iron oxide, placed my image on top, and then transferred my image using the red iron oxide like you're accustomed to doing. Once my red iron oxide was on there, I traced over my lines with a Sharpie because as we put this image, as we apply ink and put this image through the press, the red iron oxide will disappear, but the Sharpie will stay so that we can use these lines as a reference for removing more material in the future. So make sure to go over your lines in Sharpie if you want to be able to use them for subsequent carvings. My next step was to figure out the areas that I wanted to remain white and cut them away using our carving tools. So I carved away this area of her face and her eyes, her hands. This is Joan of Arc, by the way, so her armor, little details in here, and then the smoke in the background. So this has all already been cut away, and I'm ready to print my first layer in yellow. But first, I need to prepare my registration because with reductive relief printing, registration is really important to make sure that it's really nice and tight. So I'm going to be showing you a method of pin registration. There's lots of different types of registration that you can use, and I'll actually be showing you 2 types because some of you have paper that is already 11 by 14. For this project, I am using Kozo, which is a Japanese style paper that works really well with relief. It's like nice and thin and accepts the ink really well. So this sheet was about, well, normally printing paper is about 22 by 30. I think this is like 27 by 35 or something. So I cut sheets that are 11 by 15. So my image is 9 by 12 and my final size of my paper is going to be 11 by 14, but I wanted to keep an extra inch because I'm going to be punching holes into it that are going to help me with registration. So once you've cut all of your paper to 11 by 15, or if your paper is already cut to 11 by 14, you don't need to pay attention to this part. But once your paper is cut to 11 by 15, you're going to punch holes in it. So this is the punch for the punch registration system. Sometimes you need to make sure that if they're not blocked by previous hole punchings. I've made a little diagram of where to place your paper. So I have my 11 by 15 paper here. It can be a bit tricky with this Kozo paper because it's so delicate, but I'm making sure that it lines up with the bottom down here and is flush with the back at the top. And then I'm going to press down, and sometimes they catch a little bit because even though this paper is delicate, it's also really strong. So there are my punches in my paper, and you'll do this to every single one of your sheets. And so theoretically, your holes are in the exact same place on all of your papers. Once you have punched all of the holes in your sheets of paper, you'll need to prepare the registration system, which is going to look like this. Make sure you put your name on it on a piece of tape so that you know which one is yours, because if you grab a different one by mistake, your registration is going to be off. So make sure you have yours and you know which one is yours. So these are the pins that we'll be using that come like this. And then I will give you a strip of, this is just recycled ball grained aluminum lithography plates. And then I punched the holes into them using that same punch registration method. And then you'll get 2 pins, which you just pop through the metal part there. So to get to this point, you will get an L-shaped bracket. So if you're using the 11 by 14 paper, you'll also get an an L-shaped bracket. And in that case, you'll just want to measure 1 inch on one side and 1 inch at the top. And then that is going to be, because this is what we're aiming for. This is going to be how you line up your paper each time, is by lining it up with that corner and then dropping your paper down and then running it through the press. For the people using the punch registration, since we have that extra inch at the top, we're going to measure 2 inches up, because that will ensure we get our 1 inch border plus that extra inch that we will remove at the end where our pins are. So there we have 2 inches and then 1 inch over here. And then this is probably going to land somewhere around here, but I want to double check, or actually somewhere around here. I want to double check with my paper. So basically, I want to line my paper up with the 1 inch and 2 inch border, and then I'm going to hold it down with my elbow and slide my punch registration system under. Can be a bit awkward, and this can be a bit time consuming up front, but it's going to save you a lot of headaches in the long run. All right, so now the punch registration is in the correct spot, and maybe you need a buddy to help you tape it down. Oh, like I do right now. Okay, just need a couple. I'm trying not to move it. Like that. like that. And then we'll remove the paper so that we can put a couple more pieces of tape because we don't want this to move on us. All right, so once that's all set up and your paper is set up, you are ready to start printing. All right, so since I'm only doing one color, I'm using a smaller roller. A good rule of thumb when using rollers is you never want to leave them with the rubber part flat on the table because over time they will flatten on that part that's like resting against the table. The ones that we have in the studio actually have this little triangular protrusion that actually lets it sit above the surface. Oop. Well, it did. There we go. Yeah, so there's actually these like triangles on each side that keep it from resting on the glass table. Again, I clean everywhere that I'm going to roll out because I don't trust anything in the studio. I'm just using this yellow ink out of the can. I mixed a little bit of Setswell in there, and I'm going to put down a line of ink about the length of my roller and start rolling out. I have already set my press bed. We're using the small Charles brand press because the large Tackage press is currently out of order. So right now I have it set to 8/3, but I'm gonna pull a test just to make sure. But I think that was a good pressure that we used before. So I'm just rolling this out until it's nice and even. Hopefully it won't be as green as it looks on here. And then I'm gonna start rolling it out on my plate. So because we're just using one color and we're using a smaller roller, you're gonna wanna roll in multiple directions to eliminate roller marks. And I think I'm actually gonna need a little bit more ink. Again, I always hesitate to put too much ink down because it can seep into my lines. And this is also our first inking, so need a little bit more to get going. So I'm just checking to make sure that it's evenly coated. And again, when I pick it up, I like let it roll so it's gonna land at a different point on the roller, and then I charge it. All right, it's looking pretty good to me. Let's pull a proof. All right, so I have my plate here. I'm gonna put a piece of newsprint down because we're just checking the pressure right now. Have my MDF board. Make sure you put it with the smooth side down. And then this press can be a bit awkward because you actually have to push it until the press bed engages, and then it'll roll through. Alright, so actually looks like pretty good pressure to me. Nice and even. All my details showing up. So I'm going to move on to my good paper. So just proceeding as before, getting some ink on the roller, rolling it out, picking up more ink, going in a different direction, picking up more ink, like looking at the surface to make sure that ink is everywhere it needs to be. All right, and now I'm going to print on my good paper. All right, so I'm setting my inked up block down. I have my registration guide. This press is a little bit smaller, so sometimes it's hard to get everything in its place. All right, and then I'm going to take my paper. There's a textured side and a smooth side to this paper. I'm gonna print on the textured side. All right, and making sure everything's lined up. I'm going to slowly let my paper drop and smooth it down. The oil-based ink should stick to your paper, and then I'm gonna hold it with one hand and lift off and remove the L shape because I don't want to put these pins through the press or they'll damage the roller. Put a piece of newsprint down. Put the backing board down. This time we push forward and until it engages and roll it through. Pull it out. Remove the backing board. Check it out. So it's looking pretty good to me, printing nice and evenly everywhere. So now I'm going to continue to print this layer on every single sheet of paper I have, and then I'll be ready to carve the second layer. So once I had finished printing my yellow layer, I was ready to carve away the parts that I wanted to keep yellow and then print orange. So referencing my image, I could see that there are all these like little flamey bits that I had drawn on here, and also her hair that I wanted to keep yellow. So I carved in between the lines of her hair where I wanted there to show yellow, and then I also carved away those flamey bits that I wanted to stay yellow. And now I've been rolling the block up with orange. Exactly how we were doing with the yellow. And then printing on top of my yellow layers. So once the block is inked up, I'm going to move over to the press. So there's my block, and making sure that I'm using the same L-shaped bracket from before, lining it up, taking my yellow print, making sure everything's flush, popping it onto the pins, laying it down carefully, and then holding it so it doesn't move, popping the pins out, removing the L-shaped bracket, making sure it's nice and smooth, laying down a piece of newsprint, and then my board, and then running it through the press. And she lines up really nicely without having to fuss with it too much. And then so going through and doing this to each one of my yellow prints, and then I'm going to carve back into it for another layer. So now I've removed all the areas that I want to keep orange, and I'm printing brown because I wanted a little bit of brown in these sticks below and in her hair. there's our brown layer. So for our last and final layer, I have carved away all the details that I wanted to keep brown, and then left everything that is going to be this light gray. So again, I'm inking up my block.